I was mending the elbow of Noah's school sweater when I heard the suitcase. It wasn't a dramatic sound, just a hollow thud against the hardwood floor upstairs, followed by the scrape of something heavy being dragged across the bedroom. In 34 years of teaching middle school English in Ashford, Kentucky, I'd learned to read the sounds a house makes the way other people read weather. A slammed door means anger that will pass. Silence after dinner means something is being held back. And a suitcase dragged across a floor at 7 in the evening on a Wednesday, with no trip planned, that means trouble you're not ready for. I set Noah's sweater on the arm of my reading chair and climbed the stairs. The house on Birchwood Lane was old. A 2-story craftsman built in the 1940s with creaking steps and radiators that knocked and hissed through winter nights like a living thing. I'd bought it with my late husband Gerald 31 years ago, raised Ryan in its rooms, and then, after Elise died bringing Noah into the world, I had raised my grandson here too. The walls held more history than I sometimes knew what to do with. Ryan's bedroom door stood wide open. He was moving the way people move when they're trying not to think about what they're doing. Fast, mechanical, stripping the decision of any emotion before it can take root. His black canvas travel bag sat open on the unmade bed, already half filled. Shirts balled up instead of folded. A belt coiled on top of a pair of jeans. His work laptop open beside the bag. 3 or 4 browser windows lit up on the screen, though he angled the screen away before I could see clearly. "Going somewhere?" I asked from the doorway. "Business trip." He didn't look up. "Last-minute thing." Ryan worked IT support for a regional insurance company. In 6 years, they had never once sent him on a business trip. They barely asked him to drive to the satellite office across town. "How long?" I said. "Not sure yet." He opened his top dresser drawer and swept the contents into the bag. Not sorting, not choosing, just clearing. His elbow caught the framed photograph on the dresser corner and sent it spinning off onto the hardwood floor. The frame cracked against the baseboard. Inside it, Elise in the hospital bed, exhausted and radiant, holding newborn Noah against her chest. Ryan had placed that photograph there the week after her funeral and had never moved it. For 13 years, I had watched him touch the corner of that frame on his way out of the room at night, a habit so quiet and consistent it had become part of the architecture of our household, like the creak on the 4th stair or the way the kitchen door stuck in August humidity. He stepped over the broken frame without pausing. My chest tightened. I moved into the room. "Ryan, stop. Look at me." He finally turned, and what I saw in his face was worse than anger. There was no conflict there, no guilt simmering beneath the surface, just a flat, finished quality, like a man who had already had every argument with himself and closed the book on it. "I'm leaving, Mom." "Leaving for where? For how long?" "Leaving." He zipped the bag with a sound like a sentence ending. "I should have done this a long time ago. I need to breathe. I need to live my own life." 13 years of carrying this family settled somewhere behind my sternum like a stone. 13 years of packing school lunches and attending parent-teacher conferences while Ryan worked late or sat in front of his computer screen until 2 in the morning. 13 years of being, in every practical sense, Noah's parent, because Ryan had loved his son in the distant glass-walled way of a man who had never fully recovered from losing his wife. I had never resented it. I want to be clear about that. I had chosen it every single morning because Noah needed someone to choose him. "What about Noah?" I said. Ryan lifted the bag off the bed. "He's better off with you. He always has been." He said it without cruelty, which somehow made it worse, the casual delivery of something that should have required enormous effort to say. "You've been his real parent since day one. Now it's just official." I followed him out of the room, down the hallway to the top of the stairs. "Whatever's happening," I said, "we can work through it together, as a family. Whatever you're running toward, or away from, we can talk about it." He shrugged off my hand on his arm the way you'd shake off a cobweb. "There is no family, Mom. There's you and Noah, and me paying the bills so you can play house. Well," he started down the stairs, the bag bumping against each step. "Now you'll have to figure that part out yourselves." The ice that moved through me then wasn't fear exactly. It was the specific cold of understanding something you've been not quite knowing for a very long time. "What does that mean, Ryan?" "Figure it out how." But he was already in the living room. Noah was sitting at the writing desk doing his algebra homework, the same desk where I had graded essays for 3 decades, repurposed now into a homework station with a pencil cup shaped like an owl and a stack of library books held in place by a smooth riverstone he'd found on a camping trip 2 summers ago. He looked up when his father entered the room, taking in the bag, my expression, and the general temperature of the moment with those quiet brown eyes of his. Elise's eyes. In Ryan's face, carrying a thoughtfulness that had always seemed to belong to someone older. "Going somewhere, Dad?" Ryan stopped at the front door, for just a moment, and I watched carefully, because I am a woman who has watched people her entire life. I thought I saw something move across his face. Not regret exactly, more like the ghost of who he used to be, surfacing briefly before being pushed back under. "I need some time away, Bud. Grandma's going to take care of you." "For how long?" "I don't know yet." Noah nodded once, slowly, the way he processed information, storing it, filing it, making no external drama of it. "Okay," he said. That single word broke something in me that I'm not sure ever fully healed. No crying, no pleading, no throwing his arms around his father's waist the way children do in movies. Just okay, as if he had been quietly preparing for this particular answer for longer than any of us knew. Ryan opened the front door and October came into the house, cold and smelling of wet leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the street. He looked at Noah one more time. "I'll call when I'm settled." "Where are you going?" I asked. "Somewhere I can breathe again." The door closed behind him with a soft, decisive click. Through the front window, I watched him load his bag into the silver Honda, back out of the driveway without looking at the house, and drive away down Birchwood Lane until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. The radiator knocked twice and went quiet. Noah and I stood in the living room in the particular silence that follows when something that has been impending for a long time finally lands. "Is he coming back?" Noah asked. I had been a teacher long enough to know that children deserve honest answers, even when honest answers are hard, smart children especially, and Noah was one of the smartest people I had ever known, regardless of age. "I don't think so, sweetheart." He looked at me for a moment, and I waited for the grief to come, the way it had come for me already, somewhere in the chest, heavy and shapeless. Instead, Noah closed his algebra textbook with careful, deliberate precision. He stacked it neatly with his other books, squared the corners, set his pencil in the owl cup. Then he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his young face before. Not bravado, not false comfort. Something quieter and more serious than either. The expression of someone who has already thought several steps ahead and knows what needs to be done next. "Grandma," he said, "don't worry. I'll handle this." I almost said something dismissive. "Sweetie, you're 13. But something in the quality of his stillness stopped me. There was no performance in it, no childish theater, just calm, certain clarity, as if he were reporting a fact rather than making a promise. "What do you mean, handle it?" He picked up his books and moved toward the stairs. "I need to look at our bank accounts first. Then we'll know what we're actually dealing with." And then he was gone, up the stairs, door closing softly behind him, and I was left alone in the living room with the ticking clock and the cold draft still threading through the gap under the front door where Ryan had walked out. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling and did what people do at 3 in the morning when their world has shifted. I replayed every moment of the past several months, looking for the things I had chosen not to see. The way Ryan had started closing his laptop whenever someone entered the room. The private phone calls taken in the backyard, voice low, always ending before he came inside. The Saturday afternoons he said he was going to the hardware store and came back 2 hours later with nothing in his hands. The credit card statement I'd glimpsed on the kitchen counter one afternoon, an unfamiliar account number, a downtown restaurant, a charge I didn't recognize, that Ryan had folded and pocketed before I could look more closely. I had not looked more closely. That was the thing I lay awake with. Around midnight, I heard it. The soft, steady percussion of typing coming from Noah's room. Not the loose, distracted typing of a teenager on his phone. Purposeful, rhythmic, focused. I put on my robe and went down the hall. "Mason, it's past—" I stopped myself. An old habit, a name that didn't belong. "Noah, sweetheart, it's after midnight." "Come in, Grandma." He was sitting at his desk, fully dressed. Still in his school clothes, I realized he hadn't even changed. Surrounded by papers. Printed pages covered in numbers and text, organized into loose piles with the methodical tidiness that was distinctly, recognizably his. His laptop screen glowed with multiple open windows that I couldn't begin to make sense of. "What are you doing?" "Research." He gestured to the papers without looking up from the screen. "I've been going through Dad's digital footprints. It took me a few hours to piece it all together." I moved closer, and even before I understood what I was looking at, the numbers on those pages reached into my chest and squeezed. Bank statements, credit reports, pages of email printouts, all with our family name at the top. "Noah, where did you get these?" "Dad's not careful with his passwords. He said it the way you'd note that someone doesn't lock their car. Matter of fact. A simple observation of the world. He uses the same one for everything. Elise 2011, the year they got married. The year they got married. He had used the year his wife died giving birth to their son as the key to every lock in his digital life, and now that key had been turned by that same son. You logged into his email. Technically, I just used his password. It's not really hacking if he left the door open. He finally looked up at me, and what I saw in his face tightened the squeeze in my chest. He looked tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Not sleepy, but tired, the way people look when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time. "Grandma, you need to sit down. What I found is worse than you're probably expecting." I sat in the wooden chair beside his desk. My legs were glad for it. He handed me a printed bank statement. My name at the top. The account number of the savings account I had been adding to for 28 years. A teacher's pension carefully supplemented, a little added each month, slowly and steadily and without drama the way I had always lived my life. The balance column read, $14. I held the paper and read the number 3 times. The room felt like it was tilting slightly. "That can't be right." "It's right." Noah's voice was soft, but he didn't soften the truth. There was a kindness in that, in not dressing it up, not making me ask twice. "He's been moving money out gradually for 4 months. Small enough amounts each time that it wouldn't trigger an automatic alert. 40 withdrawals, Grandma. He planned it." My hands were shaking now. I made them stop. "The college fund. Noah, what about—" He handed me the second statement before I finished asking. "The education savings account, the one I had opened when Noah was 3 weeks old, depositing $50 that first month because it was all I could spare, and adding to it every single month since, without exception, showed a balance of 0. 3 weeks ago," Noah said quietly, "Dad transferred the full amount to his personal checking account, then moved it somewhere else within 48 hours. $43,000. Gone." "Somewhere else where?" Noah turned back to his screen and pulled up a social media profile. A young woman, dark-haired, mid-30s, professionally photographed in the way of someone who understood how to present themselves online. Vacation photos, a banner image of a mountain sunrise, a bio that read Financial Freedom Advisor, living intentionally. Her name is Stephanie Ward. She works at Hartwell Wealth Management on Clement Street. She's been with Dad for at least 7 months. I found the first contact in his email from March. He clicked to another document. My eyes caught words before my brain caught up to them. Loan application, identity verification, social security number, date of birth. She helped him open new accounts, move the money through multiple transfers to make it harder to trace, and apply for loans using your information. Noah's jaw tightened in a way that looked too old for his face. "A $30,000 personal loan in your name, Grandma. Your name and your social security number." $30,000 in debt I hadn't taken on, in my name, at 68 years old. And there's another one. He set a second page in front of me, and this was the one that made my vision go briefly white at the edges. A $15,000 credit card application, using my social security number, with a fake date of birth listing me as 26 years old. The silence in the room was complete. My son had taken the identity of his 13-year-old child, the child he was leaving behind, the child who had never had a mother, the child I had raised from his very first breath, and used it to borrow money he intended to disappear with. "Noah." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "How long have you known something was wrong?" He was quiet for a moment. He turned slightly in his chair, and in the lamplight I could see him deciding how much to say. 8 months, he said finally. "I started noticing things in February, the way Dad would angle his laptop when I walked past, How he'd be on his phone in the backyard, even in cold weather, and stop talking the second he heard the back door. The way he stopped asking about my grades, he always used to ask. And then one afternoon in March, I saw him slide a piece of paper into his jacket pocket when he saw me coming into the kitchen. The paper had a woman's name on it. "You've been watching for 8 months. I didn't know what I was looking at yet. I just knew something was different. He reached past his laptop and straightened a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. A small, unconscious gesture that reminded me suddenly that he was still a child, still a person with nervous hands and things he found hard to say. I started learning more about how to find information online. YouTube tutorials mostly. Some cybersecurity forums. I wanted to understand what Dad was actually doing before I said anything to you, because I didn't want to worry you unless I was sure. I didn't want to worry you. 8 months of watching, learning, preparing, carried alone in silence to protect me from worry. I looked at the desk in front of him, the organized piles of evidence, the careful labeling on each folder, the notepad with its numbered list of steps taken and steps remaining. And I understood, sitting there in my bathrobe in the small hours of the morning, that the child I had been raising had been, quietly and without fanfare, raising himself into something I hadn't known to prepare for. "This is a lot for one person to carry," I said. "I know." He met my eyes. "That's why I'm done carrying it alone. We have everything we need, Grandma. Every transfer, every forged document, every application. I've been saving screenshots and downloading records for 3 months. It's all here." He opened a folder on his desktop, labeled simply Evidence, and inside it were dozens of organized files, date-stamped, named, categorized with the precision of someone who understood that documentation was the difference between justice and noise. "What do we do with it?" I asked. Noah straightened in his chair and looked at me with the quiet certainty I was already beginning to recognize as distinctly, specifically his. "First thing tomorrow morning," he said. "I file fraud alerts on both our names with all 3 credit bureaus. Then I submit an identity theft report to the Federal Trade Commission. Then I send everything I have on Stephanie Ward to the compliance department at Hartwell." He paused. "I also found something about her background that changes things significantly. But that can wait until morning. You need to sleep, Grandma." "I don't think I can sleep." "Try." He stood up and gently took the bank statements from my hands, setting them back in their pile. "You raised me for 13 years. You made sure I was okay every single day. Let me make sure you're okay tonight." I stood in the doorway of his room for a moment, watching him turn back to his screen. This boy of mine, born in grief and raised in love, who had apparently been watching over me in the dark for 8 months without saying a word. "Noah." "Yeah? I love you, very much." He didn't look up, but I saw the small, private smile that moved across his face. "I know, Grandma. I love you too. Go to sleep." I went back to my room. I did not sleep, but I lay in the dark, and for the first time since I'd heard that suitcase hit the floor, I felt something other than cold, vertiginous fear. I felt improbably the first faint edge of hope, coming not from any certainty about what tomorrow would bring, but from the simple, extraordinary fact of who was in the room down the hall. My grandson, still in his school clothes at 1 a.m, fighting for us. For 1/2 second of pure, unguarded consciousness, that window before memory catches up with the body, I thought it was an ordinary Thursday morning. Then it all landed at once, the way grief does, not gradually, but as a single complete weight, and I lay still for a moment under the quilts Gerald's mother had sewn, breathing through it. Then I got up, because that is what you do. Noah was already in the kitchen, fully dressed in his school clothes, hair combed, 2 plates set on the small breakfast table with the careful symmetry of someone who understands that order is a form of kindness. Scrambled eggs on both plates, slightly overdone the way I'd always made them, and he'd spent years pretending to prefer. 2 glasses of orange juice, the coffee maker finishing its last few drips. "You cooked breakfast," I said. "We need our strength today." He poured juice into my glass without looking up. "Sit down, Grandma. I have some things to walk you through." I sat. He set a manila folder on the table beside his plate, but didn't open it yet. Waited until I had taken a sip of coffee, until I seemed present enough to receive what was coming. That small patience, that reading of a room, moved through me with an ache I couldn't name. "I filed the fraud alerts last night before I went to sleep," he said. "All 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, both our names. Anyone trying to open new credit using our information will hit a wall now." He opened the folder to the first page. "This morning before school, I need to submit the identity theft report to the FTC and send the initial complaint to the State Banking Commission about the fraudulent loans. Before school. I have first period free on Thursdays. It's enough time." He looked up. "But there's something else I found last night after you went to bed. Something bigger." He turned to the second section of the folder and slid a printed document across the table toward me. It looked like a court record, formatted in the dry, dense way of official legal documents, with case numbers and filing dates and the name of an Ohio district court at the top. I read the name printed midway down the first page. Stephanie Ann Ward. "Before she came to Ashford," Noah said, "Stephanie worked at a firm called Premier Capital Group in Toledo. She was arrested in 2019 for embezzlement and unauthorized access to client investment accounts. The case was pled down. She agreed to pay partial restitution and resign. No prison time. The firm didn't want the publicity of a trial, so they took the settlement and let her go." I set my coffee mug down carefully. "And Hartwell hired her anyway. They didn't check properly, or they checked and the expunged record didn't show clearly. Either way, she moved here, rebuilt her credentials, and got hired as a senior wealth advisor." Noah turned to the next page. "But here's what's important, Grandma." She didn't stop. He laid out more documents, account statements, transfer records, portfolio summaries with columns of numbers that told a story even I could follow once I understood what I was looking at. Money going in, money going out through indirect channels, replaced on paper by fabricated investment losses and manufactured market reports that clients received in their monthly statements. "I've identified 14 clients at Hartwell she's been stealing from," Noah said. "All of them over the age of 65, all of them receiving falsified statements every month showing normal account activity." He paused. "They don't know their money is gone, Grandma. They think everything is fine." I pushed my plate aside. The eggs had gone cold anyway. 14 people. 14 households waking up this morning, drinking their coffee, trusting their futures to a woman who had already quietly emptied them. "And your father," I said. It was not a question. Noah's jaw tightened. That same expression from the night before, too controlled for his age, too old for his face. "Dad knew. Not about everything at first, I think. But he knew enough. He knew she had a history." He turned to a section of printed emails, and even without reading the specific words, I could see from the formatting that these were exchanges between Ryan and Stephanie. Informal, the shorthand of people who trusted each other completely, discussing account movements in language that tried to sound routine but wasn't. He helped her create false documentation, fake loss reports to explain discrepancies. He set up shell email accounts she could use to send clients fake statements without it tracing back to Hartwell's servers. Noah looked at me directly. He identified which clients had the largest accounts and the least family involvement. He helped her choose who to take the most from. The kitchen was very quiet. I have stood in front of classrooms for 34 years. I have called parents to deliver news about their children that no parent wants to hear. I have sat with students in crisis, with colleagues in grief, with my own son in the terrible hollow weeks after Elise died and helped him hold a shape when he had no shape left. I know how to absorb hard things without crumbling in front of someone who needs me to be steady. But this, my son choosing the most vulnerable people he could find and helping drain their lives quietly, month by month, while they slept and watched television and trusted the numbers on the pages that arrived in their mailboxes, this required a moment. I took it. Then I said, "Show me who they are." Noah opened his laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet he'd built, a document he had clearly spent hours constructing, each row a person, each column a category of information: name, age, estimated loss, account type, whether they had family regularly in contact. He walked me through the ones he'd documented most fully. Frances Holbrook, 82 years old, a retired school teacher. The coincidence of it landed on me like a hand on the shoulder. Widowed 6 years ago, her retirement account, built over 40 years of work, had been reduced by $28,000 through a series of transfers disguised as portfolio rebalancing. She was still receiving monthly statements showing modest growth. "She doesn't know," Noah said. "She thinks her money is working for her right now." Earl Drummond, 74, former machinist, had sold his house when his wife needed extended care and moved the proceeds into a managed account at Hartwell for what he'd described in a client intake form. Noah had found it in Stephanie's work files as the money I'll live on for the rest of my life. Half of it was gone. He'd been told it was lost in a market correction 18 months ago. He blamed himself, Noah said quietly, pointing to a client email he'd printed. He wrote to her asking if he should have listened to the news more carefully, whether he'd missed signs he should have caught. She wrote back and told him these things happen and that she was watching his remaining portfolio carefully. Beverly Stanton, 79, a widow who had trusted Ryan specifically. Ryan, by name, listed in her intake file as her primary contact at the firm. Ryan had recommended she consolidate her savings into a new growth fund. The fund had a name, a prospectus, a phone number. None of it was real. The money had moved into accounts that existed only to dissolve. I set both hands flat on the table. "These people trusted us," I said. "They trusted people with our last name." "Yes." Noah said it simply without softening it. "How do we help them?" He turned the laptop toward me and showed me what he'd built during the hours I'd been lying sleepless down the hall. 19 individual document packages, one for each identified victim. Each package contained a complete record of what had happened to that specific person's money. Transaction histories, transfer records, names, dates, account numbers. A clear, step-by-step guide for reporting identity theft and financial fraud to the appropriate authorities. Contact information for the Ashford Legal Aid Society, the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, and a nonprofit in Louisville that specialized in helping elderly victims of financial fraud recover losses. Every package was addressed, printed, ready to be sealed. "Anonymous?" I asked. "For now. If I attach my name to these, it raises questions about how a 13-year-old obtained private financial records. Those questions could complicate the investigation." He said it with the flat practicality of someone who had already thought the problem through completely. Once there's a formal investigation underway, once the police have their own access to these records, it won't matter how the first tip arrived. What matters is that every one of these people has everything they need to start fighting back, in their hands, today. I looked at my grandson across the breakfast table, 13 years old, still growing into his father's height and his mother's eyes. At this time last week, he had been arguing with me good-naturedly about whether he had to wear a jacket to school. "When did you prepare all of these?" "Last night, after you went to bed." He checked his watch and began stacking the folder back into order. "I need to leave for school in 20 minutes, but Grandma, the packages are ready to mail. If you can take them to the post office this morning, everything starts moving today." I picked up the stack of addressed envelopes, 19 of them, each one carrying the particular weight of a life that didn't yet know it was about to get unexpected help from an anonymous source. "I'll take them," I said. 3 days passed with the strange compressed tension of waiting, like the held breath before a storm breaks or a diagnosis is delivered. I went to the post office. I filed the identity theft paperwork Noah had prepared with the careful instruction sheets attached. I ate meals and answered the phone when it rang and watched the second hand on the kitchen clock and tried to understand how the world had rearranged itself so completely in 72 hours. Noah went to school. He came home, did his homework, ate dinner, and then disappeared into his room where the quiet, purposeful typing continued until well past the hour it should have stopped. I did not ask him to go to bed earlier. I understood now that what he was doing in that room mattered and that sleep could wait. On the third evening, he came downstairs with his laptop under his arm and set it open on the kitchen table in front of me. "Hartwell suspended Stephanie Ward this morning," he said, "pending internal investigation into client account irregularities. HR received a full documented complaint yesterday. The compliance officer has been sitting on concerns about her for months but didn't have enough to act. Now she does." I read the brief internal memo he'd somehow obtained. "How did you—" "Stephanie uses the same password structure as Dad. Once I understood her pattern, I could access her work email." He held up a hand before I could speak. I know what I'm doing exists in a legal gray area. But Grandma, she's been robbing people who are 80 years old. I made one copy of one memo and I'm not touching her accounts again." He sat down. "Besides, Detective Okafor will have a warrant within the week. Everything I found, they'll find legally. Detective Okafor? Patricia Okafor, Ashford PD, Financial Crimes Unit. I sent her an anonymous tip package 4 days ago, the same night Dad left. Everything I had on Stephanie, formatted as a professional case summary with citations to all the relevant statutes. He opened a new window on his laptop. She's been moving on it. I can see from public record filings that a warrant application went into the county court 2 days ago. I sat back in my chair. Outside, the October dark had settled fully over Birchwood Lane, and the house around us was quiet in the way of a place that has been recently emptied of something that used to take up space. Noah. I paused, finding the words. You sent a warrant application to a police detective before you told me any of this was happening. I told you I'd handle it. You were 12 years old when you decided that. 13. The correction was gentle but precise, and someone had to. The phone rang on a Thursday afternoon while Noah was at school and I was paying bills at the kitchen table, sorting through the mail with the grim arithmetic of someone calculating how long a finite amount of money can be stretched. The caller ID read Ryan's cell number, and my heart did the involuntary thing it does when it hasn't yet caught up with what the mind knows. I answered. Mom. His voice had changed completely. The flat, finished quality of the night he left was gone. What replaced it was something I hadn't heard from my son since the week after Elise died. A raw, stripped-back desperation, like a man suddenly standing in weather he hadn't dressed for. Something's wrong. Everything is coming apart, and I think someone is targeting me and Stephanie. I said nothing. I watched the clock on the microwave and listened. My bank accounts are frozen. The police came to the motel yesterday asking about identity theft complaints. Stephanie got suspended from her job this morning, and the State Banking Commission sent a formal inquiry to Hartwell. Someone has everything, Mom. Emails, bank records, transfer histories. They sent her boss a complete documented file. His breathing was uneven. This is coordinated. This is someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Ryan, I said carefully, maybe this is consequences catching up with you. This isn't consequences. This is a targeted attack. Whoever is doing this has serious technical skills, and they clearly want to destroy us. His voice cracked on the last word. Mom, I need you to be careful. If someone has this much access, they might come after you and Noah next. The irony moved through me like a cold current. Where are you staying? I asked. The Sunrise Inn, out on Route 12. Stephanie and I have been paying cash because our cards keep getting declined. The apartment we were going to rent in Nashville, he stopped. Nashville, so that had been the destination. The landlord in Nashville turned us down after getting an anonymous tip about our background. Mom, someone is hunting us. He exhaled roughly. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you and Noah. But what Stephanie and I did, it's not as serious as they're making it sound. We were going to pay everything back. You used Noah's social security number, Ryan. Silence. You took his identity. He's 13 years old. You borrowed money against your own child's future to run away with a woman who was stealing from elderly people. I didn't know the full extent of what You identified her targets, Ryan. My voice was steady. I was proud of it for that. The police will find emails where you told her which clients to prioritize based on their account balances and how much family contact they had. Beverly Stanton trusted you by name. She asked you specifically for advice, and you pointed her toward money that doesn't exist. The silence on his end stretched so long I checked the call was still connected. When he spoke again, his voice was different. How do you know about Beverly Stanton? I heard the back door open. Noah's footsteps in the mudroom, the thump of his backpack on the bench. Mom, nobody should know that name unless they've been inside Stephanie's client files. How do you... Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his jacket, reading my expression in one quick scan. He crossed the room silently, set his laptop open on the table, and typed a message in the Notes app, turning the screen toward me. Keep him talking. 10 minutes. I held his gaze for 1 second. He nodded once, calm and certain, and went back to his laptop. Ryan, I said, I think you need to start thinking very seriously about turning yourself in. Nobody is turning themselves in. We just need to get somewhere and regroup. His voice picked up a desperate momentum. Mom, please, whatever you think I've done, I'm still your son. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything when you were the son I raised. Right now I'm having trouble finding him. You can't. You left Noah with $14, Ryan. My voice finally broke, just slightly at the edges. Not $1,200, not $12,000, $14. And you left owing money in his name that he doesn't even know about yet. He's 13 years old. He still has a stuffed penguin on the top shelf of his closet that he pretends he keeps for sentimental reasons. A sound came through the phone that I didn't want to interpret. Noah slid the laptop screen toward me. On it, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Units in position. Keep him on the line. 3 minutes. My heart knocked hard against my ribs. Mom, I know what you need, Ryan. You've always needed things. What you never understood is that Noah needed things too, every single day, and someone had to provide them. I couldn't. After Elise, I couldn't. I know you couldn't. And I am telling you, as your mother and as the person who did it anyway, that is not an excuse for what you did to him. Through the phone, I heard a sound, a hard knock, official and unmistakable. Then another. Ryan's voice cut off mid-breath. Then other voices, distant and clear. Ryan Calloway, this is the Ashford Police Department. Open the door. Noah closed his laptop. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and we looked at each other across the plates from this morning's breakfast, still stacked in the drying rack, while through my phone speaker we heard the sounds of a door opening, of professional voices reading familiar words, of a situation resolving itself the way Noah had planned for it to resolve, precisely and completely, and without any unnecessary drama. The call ended. The kitchen was very quiet. Is it over? I asked. The arrests are over. Noah folded his hands on the table with the composure of someone much older. The recovery is just beginning. But yes, Grandma, the part where we were victims is finished. I looked at my grandson across the table. This boy Elise had died to bring into the world, whom Ryan had abandoned without a backward glance, who had spent 8 months watching and learning and preparing in silence so that I would not have to face this alone. He looked back at me steadily, and I saw in his face both the child I had raised and the person he was becoming, and I understood that these two things were not in conflict, that the one had grown from the other the way strong things grow, quietly, underground, before they emerge into the light. Thank you, I said. He shook his head slightly. You don't thank family. He got up and put the kettle on for tea, and we sat together in the kitchen while the October dark gathered outside and the old house settled around us, and somewhere across town the rest of the dominoes finished falling. The first hard frost came early that year. I remember standing at the kitchen window on a November morning, watching it silver the grass on the small backyard of our new house on Maple Street, and thinking that there was something almost kind about the way winter stripped everything back to its essentials. No pretense, no performance, just the bare bones of things, clean and honest in the cold light. We had moved in October, 2 weeks after the arrests, when it became clear that the house on Birchwood Lane carried too much of the wrong kind of memory in its walls. The new house was smaller by a third, on a quieter street, with a maple tree in the front yard that Noah had immediately claimed as a landmark. That's how people will know where we live, he'd said, carrying boxes through the front door. The house with the good tree. It was the most 13-year-old thing he'd said in weeks, and I had held on to it like a small, warm stone. The new kitchen had a window over the sink that caught the morning light differently than the old one. More directly, more generously, filling the room with something that felt, on good days, almost like optimism. I had arranged the same coffee mugs on the same hooks, put Gerald's mother's quilt on the same chair, set the framed photograph of Elise, a different photograph, one from before Noah was born, Elise laughing at something outside the frame with her whole face, on the shelf above the radiator where I could see it from the table. We were rebuilding, not restoring. That word implies returning to something. We were building something new from the materials we had left, which turned out to be more than I'd expected. Noah came through the front door on a Tuesday afternoon in late November with more energy in his body than I'd seen from him since before Ryan left. The particular brightness of someone carrying good news they've been holding on to all day. He dropped his backpack in the mudroom, came into the kitchen, and set an official envelope on the table in front of me with a precision that was purely theatrical. Open it, he said. The return address was the Kentucky Office of the Attorney General, Consumer Protection Division. I opened it carefully, the way you open things that might matter. The letter was formal and dense, with legal language in the upper sections, But midway down the first page, the numbers appeared with the simple clarity of arithmetic. Restitution payment in the amount of $21,300, representing Dorothy Calloway's proportional recovery from the liquidated assets of Stephanie Ward, including proceeds from the sale of a vehicle, personal jewelry, and investment accounts funded with misappropriated client money. $21,300. Not everything. Not even close to everything. But the number I had written on Noah's original college fund account when I opened it, the number I had told myself was the floor, the minimum, the starting point from which we would build, was $20,000. We were above the floor. I set the letter down on the table, and I did something I had not done in front of Noah since the night Ryan walked out the door. I cried. Not the contained, private crying of someone managing themselves. The real kind. The involuntary kind. The kind that comes from somewhere below decision. Noah sat down beside me and didn't say anything. Didn't offer solutions or silver linings or any of the reasonable, intelligent observations I'd learned to expect from him. He just sat close enough that our shoulders were touching and let me cry and waited. When I was done, he passed me a paper towel from the holder on the table. Practical, unadorned, and I almost laughed. "The other families?" I asked when I could. He opened his laptop, which had materialized on the table as if by habit. Francis Holbrook received $22,000 in restitution last week. Earl Drummond got his full amount back. They recovered it before it cleared the final transfer. He scrolled down his spreadsheet. 14 of the 19 families are receiving something. Most of them not everything, but something. The ones who got the anonymous packages early had more time to work with their lawyers before assets could be moved further. 14 families, sitting in their kitchens right now, opening letters of their own. Old hands unfolding paper, eyes moving over numbers, understanding slowly that something they'd given up for lost was coming back. "And your father?" Noah closed the laptop gently. 4 years in federal prison. He pled guilty on 3 counts: identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. His lawyer negotiated down from a longer exposure. He was quiet for a moment. He could be out in 3 with good behavior. 3 years. Ryan would be 41. Noah would be 16. Almost 17. I thought about what it would mean for Noah to be 16 when his father got out of prison, and found I couldn't think about it clearly enough to draw conclusions. It was too far ahead, in a future that would be shaped by things I couldn't predict. "How do you feel about it?" I asked. I always asked. It seemed important to keep asking. Noah considered the question the way he considered everything. Fully, without rushing toward an answer he hadn't earned yet. "I feel like it's the right number," he said finally. "Not revenge, just math. What he did has a cost, and he's paying it." He looked at the table. "I don't feel happy about it. I want you to know that. It doesn't feel good the way I thought it might." "What does it feel like?" "Finished," he said. "It feels finished, like closing a book." One afternoon in December, I was reaching into Noah's desk drawer for a pen. He was at school. I was writing Christmas cards at his desk because the light was better in his room in the afternoons, and I pulled open the wrong drawer. Inside it was a composition notebook, the black and white marbled kind he'd used for notes since 5th grade. It fell partially open as I set it aside, and I saw the date on the first visible page. February 14th. 8 months before Ryan left. I should have closed it. I knew even then that I should have closed it. But the date sat there with the weight of everything I now understood, and my hands made the decision before my conscience could intervene. The entries were not dramatic. That was the first thing that struck me. They were observational, precise, dated, almost clinical in the way they recorded details without editorializing. Dad was on the phone in the backyard again, about 25 minutes. Hung up before coming inside. 3rd time this week. 3 weeks later, Dad closed the laptop when I came into the living room. Quick, like a reflex. He used to leave it open all the time. And then in March, a single line that sat alone at the top of a page. Saw a woman's name on a paper in Dad's jacket. S. Ward, we'll look this up. Page after page, month after month. Not a child's diary. No emotion, no self-pity, no fear. A record. Built by a 13-year-old who had understood, at some bone-deep level, that the adults in his life were not handling things, and that someone needed to start paying attention. I turned to the last written page. One entry, near the bottom, dated the week before Ryan left. I think it's going to happen soon. I've been getting everything ready. I don't want to tell Grandma yet because she'll worry and there's nothing to do until there's something to do. She's already carrying enough. This part is mine to carry. She raised me. The least I can do is make sure she doesn't have to face this alone when it comes. I sat in Noah's desk chair in the afternoon light for a long time. Then I placed the notebook carefully back in the drawer, exactly as I'd found it, and I went downstairs and stood at the kitchen window and watched the maple tree in the front yard, bare now in the December cold, its branches making their clean black lines against the pale sky. He had known. He had watched and learned and prepared and carried it alone for 8 months. Not because he had no one to tell, but because he loved me enough to wait until he had something to offer along with the truth. She raised me. The least I can do is make sure she doesn't have to face this alone. That evening I was in the kitchen when Noah came home from his after-school computer science club, a new addition to his Thursday routine, something he'd joined quietly and mentioned only when I'd asked about his schedule. He came in, hung up his jacket, washed his hands, and sat down at the kitchen table with the comfortable ease of someone arriving in a place that fits them. Then he stopped. He looked at my face. He was 13 years old and the son of a woman who had known how to read people, and some things are inherited. "You found the notebook," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even entirely a question. Just a statement of understanding, offered without defense. "I wasn't looking for it," I said. "Wrong drawer." He nodded slowly. "It's okay." "Noah." I sat down across from him. "You were 12 years old when you started that notebook, when you decided to start watching, 13 in April. You were 12 years old," I said again gently, "and you decided to protect me, by yourself, for 8 months, without telling me." He was quiet. Outside, the December wind moved through the maple tree and the branches tapped lightly against the front window. "Someone had to," he said. "You didn't have to do it alone. If I'd told you what I suspected, you would have worried. And worrying without being able to act yet, that's the worst kind. I know because I felt it for 8 months. He looked at me steadily. "I wanted to give you the truth and the solution at the same time, so you'd never have to hold just the problem by itself." I looked at my grandson across the kitchen table of our small new house on Maple Street, and I thought about Elise, who had been quiet in the same way, who had held things carefully, who had thought before she spoke, who had understood instinctively that words have weight and should be placed with care. "Your mother would have done the same thing," I said. Something shifted in his face, the careful composure softening just slightly at the edges. "Do you think so?" "I know so." He looked at the table for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were bright but dry, still his mother's eyes, still carrying that quality of seeing clearly and bearing what they saw. "I miss her," he said. "I know that's strange because I never actually knew her, but I miss her anyway." "That's not strange at all," I said. "That's just love." I had been planning it for 2 weeks. The recipe was in Elise's handwriting in a small blue notebook she'd kept in the kitchen on Birchwood Lane, a collection of dishes she'd gathered from her mother, her grandmother, cooking shows she'd loved. I had kept the notebook without ever using it, the way you keep certain things, not because you're ready to use them, but because you're not ready to let them go. That night I made her slow-cooked beef stew. I had the recipe opened on the counter and I followed it exactly. Her notations in the margins, her small amendments, the way she'd written more thyme than it says next to the herbs, and underlined it twice. The kitchen filled slowly with a smell that I had not encountered in 13 years, and the specific grief of it was something I hadn't anticipated. How a smell could carry an entire person, could make someone present and absent simultaneously in a way that was almost unbearable and almost beautiful at the same time. Noah came downstairs at 6 o'clock and stopped in the kitchen doorway. He stood very still. I kept my back to him, kept stirring, gave him a moment with it, with the smell, with whatever it opened in him, with the particular silence of someone encountering something that belonged to a part of their history they couldn't directly remember, but had always carried. "That's," he stopped. "Your mother's recipe," I said, "from her notebook." I heard him cross the kitchen and sit down at the table. I didn't turn around yet. I gave him the privacy of his own face for another moment. "Why tonight?" His voice was very quiet. I set the spoon on the rest and turned. He was sitting with his hands folded on the table, and he looked, For the first time in months, maybe for the first time since Ryan left, young, genuinely, simply young. Not the careful, controlled competence that had carried us through the fall. Not the researcher, the investigator, the quiet architect of justice. Just a 13-year-old boy sitting in a kitchen that smelled like the mother he'd never gotten to know. "Because I found your notebook today," I said, "and I wanted you to know that the people we love don't disappear. They just change shape. They live in recipes and in the way you hold a pencil and in the particular way you read a room before you speak." I sat down across from him. "She's in you, Noah. She has been from the beginning." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time since October, his face came completely undone. Not crying, not breaking, but releasing, like a hand that has been holding something tightly for a very long time finally, carefully, opening. "I'm tired, Grandma," he said, not complaining, not asking for anything, just telling the truth. "I know, sweetheart." I reached across and covered both his hands with mine. "You can be tired now. You did everything. It's over, and you can rest." We ate her stew together as the December dark settled over Maple Street. The maple tree's bare branches moving gently against the window, the old radiator beginning its familiar knocking in the walls of the new house that was slowly, steadily becoming home. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I am writing this now from the chair by the front window, the one with Gerald's mother's quilt over the arm. Noah is upstairs. I can hear the occasional soft sound of typing, slower than it used to be, less urgent. He joined a robotics team in January. He got a 94 on his chemistry midterm. Last week he came home with a library book about constitutional law and left it on the kitchen table without comment, the way he leaves things he wants me to notice. He still runs his small website, Callaway Digital Safety, resources and guidance for families navigating financial fraud, entirely free. He helped 6 more families this winter. He does not talk about it much. It is simply part of what he does, like his homework and his Thursday club and the way he always remembers to ask how my knee is feeling when the cold sets in. The letter from Springfield Correctional is still on the shelf above the radiator. Ryan has written twice now. Both letters remain unopened. I am not ready. I may not ever be ready. I hold that uncertainty without forcing it toward a resolution it hasn't earned, because some things deserve to be approached slowly and with honesty, and forgiveness is one of them. What I know is this. Ryan left believing he was abandoning 2 helpless people, a retired schoolteacher running out of money and a quiet boy who kept his feelings to himself. He thought he was escaping something that would simply fold behind him, close up, disappear. He did not know about the notebook. He did not know about the 8 months of watching and preparing and learning. He did not know that the boy he was leaving had spent the better part of a year making sure that when the worst came, we would not be standing in it alone and empty-handed. He did not know what he was leaving behind. That is, I think, the truest and saddest thing about all of it. Not the money, not the fraud, not even the betrayal. The truest and saddest thing is that Ryan Callaway looked at his son and saw someone to leave, and his son looked back at him and saw someone worth protecting, even from himself. Real love doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition or ask to be seen. It just keeps going, quietly, in the background, doing the work, showing up in notebooks and scrambled eggs and 19 anonymous envelopes and a bowl of stew made from a dead woman's recipe on a cold December night. That is what my grandson taught me this year. And I am 68 years old, and I have been a teacher my entire life, and I want you to know, the best lessons still come when you're not expecting them. We are okay, not because everything is okay, but because we have chosen, every morning, to continue, and because we are choosing it together. That is enough. That is, it turns out, everything.